For TigerDetails.com, Jerit Roser here with Nikki Chavanelle from the Rivals Arkansas site, Hawgbeat.com. Getting ready, we think, for this LSU versus Arkansas game on Saturday. Nikki, how are things going? And we'll get to some of that, hoping that we see football on Saturday in a second. But how are things going up y'all's way overall?
Yeah, everything's good. Sam Pittman told us that he should be back in the office today after having to miss the Florida game. He couldn't make the trip to Gainesville, tested positive for coronavirus last Sunday. So now he's finally out of the 10-day stretch of quarantine. I don't think he told us that he had tested negatively multiple times, but I guess we assume that at this point. So that's good. The team doesn't seem to be too down after losing to Florida. That was a really tough game, but they never laid down. So that's a change for them in a blowout loss. And there's a lot of hope that this can finally be the year they beat LSU.
Yeah, and I mean, on the flip side, we saw LSU have such an incredible historical year last year, and it's been a really frustrating go this year. So this would certainly be a year with Arkansas, I think, surprising some folks this year in a positive way, and LSU surprising some folks in the other way that, going up to Fayetteville, there's an opportunity there for the Razorbacks. But do we get there? What are you hearing? LSU coming back off of a couple of weeks of not having enough players to face Alabama this past week and getting most of those guys back. I mean, still as we speak, they got some back Tuesday. They get some back later today on Wednesday. And Arkansas has had some positive tests come back for its players. Are you getting the sense that we'll be okay to go, or obviously still several days until game time? What do we know?
So Arkansas, like this whole time, they're not telling us numbers really. Anything that we hear is stuff that we hear, and just kind of either you can get some kind of confirmation or not. Usually we just kind of keep that stuff to the message board because obviously the coaches, like, they know it's a competitive advantage not to have specific numbers out there and everything. But we saw the Arkansas Democratic Gazette actually confirmed that they had two non-assistant staff personnel test positive on Sunday or Monday, and one player. And I believe that one player, it might be more at this point because they've already had another round of testing, I believe, and got the results today. That one player might have knocked out a good number of other people. I heard that the offensive line was low at practice yesterday, although mostly like some freshman linemen that haven't played. So none of the starters, I don't think. But overall, Hunter Yurchek, the athletic director, said yesterday, I think that stuff is still good to go in terms of playing the game on Saturday. But, there's still, I think, another round at least, if not two, before game day. So a lot could change between now and then.
Yeah, and you mentioned just the one positive test can have such a huge effect depending on just the contact tracing. That's what cost LSU that opportunity to face Bama, is not so much the number of positive tests, but the contact tracing piece. And so it's just kind of part of the world we live in this fall, I guess.
Yeah. One thing I would look out for, one name I've heard solidly, is maybe Rakeem Boyd perhaps not being able to play on Saturday. And that would suck because it's not just his first game that he's missed. He missed another one due to injury as well. And the whole reason he came back was to improve his draft stock. So far, not looking so good in terms of that. So we'll be obviously in the stadium, as soon as they open the gates. So we'll let you guys know, but look out for number 5, the running back. He's not the leading rusher this year, actually, because he missed that time. And Traylon Smith, the transfer from Arizona State, has looked pretty good, but would still be a big blow if he's not available on Saturday.
And I mean, some of the bright spots and where we are with an Arkansas team sitting at 3-4 against was talked about when this new adjusted schedule came out. Maybe the toughest schedule in the history of college football when you talk about a 10-game slate against the SEC West and adding those teams from the East that they had to face. They're sitting there at 3-4. I still think they got robbed against Auburn, so could be sitting there with a winning record. And those running backs have been a big part of that. One of just a couple of teams that has two or more guys over 300 yards rushing. And so Rakeem's a big part of that, right over 300 yards. What stood out to you this year? You've been up there a few years now, and this has been a much different year than your previous two. What's kind of stood out about the culture shift, and what's gone so well, even despite that tough slate?
Yeah, well, Sam Pittman, I mean, he was left with a pretty decent roster. Like Chad Morris, the one thing that he did pretty well was recruit better than Brett Bielema. So he had a lot of talent, especially in the 2019 class. That's the class that has, Traylon Burks, Trey Knox, who hasn't been doing very much this season, but Hudson Henry, who is now the starting tight end. He was injured last game against, who did they just play?
The Florida game?
Yeah, he was injured against Florida, but he'll be back this week. Just that 2019 class has done so much to bolster it. And then obviously you go get Felipe Franks as a grad transfer for this year. And of all the grad transfers, he's had the biggest impact for the team. So Sam Pittman has had good players, and they've known that they're better than the record has shown these past few years. So they were just so hungry for a coaching staff that believes in them. And that was the first thing that Sam Pittman set out to do, was to show the players that he had confidence that they could win with whoever was on the team. And just like build up their confidence so much that it didn't matter if they were facing Georgia or Alabama, whoever. They're going to go out there believing that they can win as long as they work as hard as they can possibly work. And that's been the biggest thing. I think, like, it's basically like they've gone to a blue collar mentality of like everything is going to be earned and worked for. And I think that it resonates with the fan base. It resonates with the players. A lot of them are from the state of Arkansas, or are like, more like country type guys who grew up with that blue collar mentality. And it's just worked out really well. When the coach believes in you, you want to play a lot harder for him. And that's what we've seen.
A couple of guys that are up there too that I know some folks from down here will remember from some high school days. Greg Brooks Jr., who has a couple of interceptions, Joe Fuchsia with a couple of interceptions, helping be a part of that defense that is among the best at forcing turnovers and coming away with takeaways nationally. What has that attitude and energy looked like for the Razorbacks defense this year, and how huge has that turnover margin been?
Yeah, I mean, that's been the biggest difference between Arkansas last year and this year, besides the passing game with Felipe Franks. The secondary is young, but they have a lot of talent, and I think they just really love Barry Odom's scheme. They like playing with 8 guys back there. Obviously, it gives you a lot of reassurance that if you don't make the play, someone else is going to make it, so you can be aggressive, and everyone is just like all hats to the football every single play, and that leads to good things. The first guy might not get the ball, but the second guy will. And so yeah, that group, I mean, you have a guy like Hudson Clark, who no one knew his name 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, and he's just playing really well. Teams are starting to target him a lot more. They're picking on him. He's just giving them cushion and doing as best as he can, because that's basically what Arkansas is down to now. Like, at this point, their depth is at the point where even when your walk-on redshirt freshman isn't playing that well, you still have to stick with him. But, it could pay off if you force enough mistakes. They weren't able to do that against Kyle Trask, that he's just a really clean player. But, if you get TJ Finley a little riled up, you might make some mistakes there.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the junior, the veteran for LSU is likely done for the year. All indications seem to be that Miles Brennan we won't see again until next year, and so suddenly you have a couple of true freshmen in TJ Finley leading the way, and Max Johnson getting some opportunities for LSU, and that's another piece of this that potentially bodes well on Saturday for Arkansas. Obviously, TJ's had some success in his debut at home, but not so much when he went on the road to Auburn. As you kind of gear up for this matchup, what have been some of the areas that you see for Arkansas that you feel like for them to get back on the right side against LSU, these are some X factors or critical components of the game?
Well, they need to continue having better tackling. They were pretty poor 2 games ago, and then against Florida, they were okay. They need to, not miss assignments, stuff like that. That's pretty easy. And then the communication in the secondary needs to be key. It was bad against Florida. They had some busted coverages, and just it didn't look good when they were going downfield. And so that's something I'm looking for. They need to get pressure. Obviously, they didn't do that against the Florida offensive line, which was really good. So maybe they'll have some better luck against LSU's offensive line. They need to make the quarterback uncomfortable, because that's just the scheme that Barry Odom has. Like, you don't have to sack him, but you have to at least get him off the spot. They need to get the run game going. Hopefully Rakeem Boyd's available. If not, Traylon Smith has had a really good season. He's averaging like 5.7 yards per carry, bolstered by I think it was like a 83-yard touchdown run. So he's had a little bit of help in that stat, but they need to get the run game going. And then also they lost Davion Warren, who was the number 3 receiver this season. He tore his ACL. He was returning a kick out of the end zone. He didn't need to do it, but Arkansas has had like nothing in the return game this year, and he probably felt pressure to get something going. Unfortunately, tore his ACL. So they need to find someone else to step up. Although, it never hurts to give Treylon Burks even more targets, and they should probably just shift those over if they can, if he's not covered too well by Derek Stingley.
Yeah, I was sad to see that news about Davion, another Louisiana guy from up in the north half of the state. And a lot of what you're saying sounds probably very familiar to LSU fans who have been frustrated with blown coverages and missed assignments, poor eye discipline, and so much of LSU's defense has relied on whether they can get pressure on the quarterback, which they have had success with a fair amount this year. But if they can't get there, then it's been problems. And I think some of that we've seen really around the league and nationally, just defensive struggles with some of these teams that we're not used to seeing. And part of that may be the weird year, but I don't know how much of that have you, I guess, considered from just the weird year and missed practice time and all that standpoint. And I'm assuming up there it's probably similar to LSU where the coaches and players are trying to not let that be an excuse nonetheless.
Yeah, they're trying their best, but during the bye week that Arkansas had, they weren't tackling. They just needed to keep everyone as healthy as they could. I think on Monday of this week they went shells only because people were banged up. So they're just not able to be as physical as they would like. Numbers are low already. They had some guys opt out. They brought in a transfer from Oklahoma at linebacker, and they really needed help at linebacker, and he had to have season-ending shoulder surgery before he could even participate. They had a corner from Arkansas State transfer in. He lost his spot briefly and got upset and decided to opt out. So they've just had some issues with depth there, but they have a lot of young talent that I think just has a lot of room to grow. But a guy like Jalen Catalon, he's a redshirt freshman, and he has just, taken over the defense. They say that he talks to the group like he's a senior. So it just bodes well for the future for Arkansas defensively.
This matchup, if we get there on Saturday morning, with obviously there's a historical rivalry component there, and we've had some weird ones between these two teams at times through the years. With Arkansas, after a couple of rough years, some down years, sitting at 3-4 and looking at this LSU game and now the rest of the slate, what does this week potentially mean as, whatever it may mean from a rivalry standpoint, or the opportunity to finish a certain place on the season, or a measuring stick, or whatever you see in terms of the significance for Arkansas?
Well, I think every SEC team this year relishes beating the defending national champion, even though LSU kind of looks like a shell of itself from last year. It's just that you get to say that, it doesn't happen very often. You look at, I think it was Brett McMurphy or something yesterday, he tweeted that the line shift from last season, I don't know, it was probably like LSU plus 38 or minus 38 or something, and now it's gone back. But Arkansas was favored at the beginning of the week. That shift is like the largest in 2 seasons between 2 different teams. So the fact that they've already made that much of a difference, and I know a lot of it has to do with LSU and how they've done, but the esteem that people have for Arkansas, like being able to actually go out there and beat it and get it done, like several other teams have done this season against LSU, like that would just show that, they have everything it takes. And I think they already showed that against Tennessee, but when they got that Tennessee win, suddenly a bowl was in sight. And so that is like the ultimate goal. They haven't been to a bowl game in several years. I think these guys deserve it. They went through a lot in the past 2 years. And so beating LSU, and then they would just have Missouri left in the way. And I know the guys are really excited to play Missouri this year. It's gotten a little bit more contentious over the past few seasons. So yeah, it would mean everything, I think, for them to be able to get bowl eligible. And that might only take 4 wins this year. Not sure about that, but I think 5 would definitely do it.
Yeah, I said on a show last night that after watching Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase gritty all over the field on Saturday, every Saturday last fall, I don't think there's anyone outside of the state lines of Louisiana that feels bad for LSU at the moment, and everyone's kind of enjoying the opportunity to get back on the right side. So I'm sure, a nice showing from Arkansas on Saturday would make some people up there smile quite a bit.
I mean, LSU was like an amazing story. I think I didn't grow up like a fan of any SEC team, so I didn't have any built-in animosity towards LSU, and it was just amazing to watch. You were witnessing history, and now we're also kind of witnessing history in the opposite direction, and so it's just funny how life works like that.
Anything coming the rest of this week that you think folks should keep an eye on as some of the LSU fans are trying to make sure that they're ready from the just being informed on Arkansas and where the Razorbacks are standpoint?
Well, we haven't asked Sam Pittman about this yet. We'll get him again tomorrow. But Felipe Franks did injure his hand against Florida, and he ended up playing like a few more snaps, and then he went out because, the game was out of reach at that point, and it was good to get KJ Jefferson some snaps, but it was clear that it was bothering him, and I think it might still be bothering him. So that would be something to watch on Saturday, but it's his non-throwing hand, so stuff that impacts, like the clap pre-snap and stuff like that. So I'm sure they're trying to work out ways to get around him having to do that a bunch.
Well, folks can keep up with Hawgbeat, everything that Nikki and Andrew and company have going on up there through the week. And appreciate you taking a few minutes to chat about it, and hopefully we see some football on Saturday.
No problem. Thanks, Jerit. You guys let me know if you need anything.
Sounds good. Again, she's Nikki Chavanelle from Hawgbeat.com. For TigerDetails.com, Jerit Roser.